Please excuse my kitchen. It is my real kitchen. Yes, that's my Switch. I was playing Animal Crossing and Hollow Knight, so. Hello everyone, my name is Lisa and I'm the Viet Vegan because I'm Vietnam vegan. And today I'm gonna share a little bit about my new friend, my little new child called Carter. If you guys have been following me on Instagram, you guys have known that I've been on the sourdough train. I was like 3 months late because everyone was doing this during quarantine, but I couldn't find whole wheat flour. So I found it 3 months later and then I started my starter. This is Carter, this is my sourdough starter. I started him like a month and a half ago. He kind of smells like garlic sauce. Is the jar not clean? Oh well, whatever. So today's video, I'm going to bake a loaf of bread. Just like this. I baked this morning, like 2 hours ago. Still kind of warm, perfectly baked through. And yeah, this is my last practice loaf before I filmed this video because my last few loaves have been Frisbee disappointments, even though the first few were like amazing. So I'm glad that I am able to, you know, recreate this and that I wasn't just beginner's luck. But anyway, I'm gonna show you the whole process of my baking sourdough, including my feeding of Carter the starter. I don't have like a recipe specifically for this just because my recipe is based off of Foolproof Baking's recipe because like I don't feel qualified to share a recipe for sourdough with you. And also I paid for this recipe and I want to make sure that she gets paid for the work that she's done. If you want a free recipe online, there are lots of other sourdough recipes online, but I'm just gonna share with you what I've been using and what I've been doing and what techniques I've been using. So first we're gonna start by building our leaven and feeding Carter the starter. So if you guys have never understood what sourdough is or why it's different from regular yeasted bread, it's all because of a sourdough starter. Sourdough starter is like a symbiotic culture of yeast and bacteria to create the leaven that makes sourdough. It gives it that like tangy, sour flavor. And that way you don't have to add like dry active yeast or anything like that. It's just fresh wild yeast that's captured this way. I'll have a blog post about how I started my sourdough starter. I don't know if you'll want to follow exactly what I did because I really messed up in the beginning, but I had Liz Mew, also the YouTuber Loud Noodle. She was the one that basically was my Carter godmother who helped me sort of figure out what was wrong with Carter and how to get that started because I was starting my sourdough with the King Arthur flour recipe. And that starts off with whole wheat flour and water. And like the beginning of that was great. And then as soon as it said to just start feeding all-purpose flour, my sourdough starter just like tanked and I didn't really know what to do. But in my blog post, I'll share like what I did. And again, by no means does it mean that's what you need to do to create your own sourdough starter. It's just the steps that I had to take to create mine, and troubleshooting it and learning how to read the starter and figure out like the symptoms or like understanding like what it needed or what it wanted helped me a lot. So hopefully my findings will help you too. And of course I will credit Liz Mew for basically teaching me like what hooch is, how to feed, what percentage hydration is, or like, you know, all that kind of stuff. We're gonna start by feeding my sourdough starter with a scale. So if you don't have a scale yet, like you can do this without a scale. It's just a lot harder to understand what is happening and where you're going wrong. All right, so we're tearing it out to 0. I usually measure out the water first. I actually feed this at an 80% hydration. Normally my ratio is 1:5:5, but because it's been really hot, my sourdough starter has been really, really active. So I read on Foolproof Baking that if you reduce the hydration, then you get a slower starter, which is what I wanted because he's too active. So I'm gonna start with 20 grams of water. And I'm using cold filtered water, again, because I'm trying to slow him down. 21.3, I'm just gonna pour out a tiny bit. It doesn't really matter, but, oh, 20 on the dot, that's nice. Okay, so this is my Carter flour mix. And I basically use this so that I don't have to measure out different amounts each time. I just measure it out into one big jar, and that is what I use to mix up my starter. This is currently a blend of 1 part whole wheat, 1 part rye to 3 parts all-purpose flour. I like just having both rye and whole wheat just because my starter really likes it. You can just make a sourdough starter with just all-purpose or just whole wheat or just rye. They will just have slightly different balance of properties, I guess. Okay, so I'm measuring 25 grams of flour mix. We've got 25 grams of the flour mix, 20 grams of water, and then I'm gonna add 5 grams of starter. And if you look at the starter, I know that it's ready because it like has this like web-like structure inside when it's like kind of ready. So I'm gonna add 5 grams of this guy. Then I just mix this up. So you just mix this until all the flour is incorporated. You wanna make sure all the flour is hydrated. And of course, because I poured water down the side, it's gonna make my life a little bit more difficult for me. Some people have asked me why I discard, and it's because that way you have to feed less to your starter, because if there's more starter to feed, it needs more food, but if you start with less starter, then it needs less food. There are discard recipes that you can make. I'm actually saving all of my discard and putting it in another jar because I want to make English muffins and it needs a cup of discard, so I just keep that in the fridge. Once that's ready, then I add a rubber band around the side. So that's my sourdough starter. I put a lid on it, and then he goes on the side, and I feed him in 12 hours. Again, because I have it at an 80% hydration, I only needed to feed every 12 hours. My starter is like so strong that if I had it at 100% hydration, I'd have to feed in 8 hours because he's just like way too strong, and like I can't afford that much flour. I am also gonna build a leaven today for my next boule that I'm baking with you guys. So we're doing a 1-to-2 ratio for the leaven. You can bake straight from like this, I mean, not this one, but like the mature starter. You just need like a certain amount of it, but I like building a leaven just so that I have like a fresh starter for my bread. Cause I'm not that good at it yet and I don't wanna play around, you know? So we're gonna do 2 parts water, and then I do flour. So I'm gonna do 20 grams of all-purpose and then 10 grams of my mix. And then I just use this mix of stuff. Because the majority of my bread is all-purpose, and I want my starter to recognize that flour as food, because that's what bread is. It's digested flour by yeast, and that's what makes it rise. All right, and then I add the 1 part of sourdough starter. And then the same thing, we mix this up. And this is at 100% hydration. So you can already tell that it's like a lot more loose, easier to mix. So this will develop a lot faster, ideally. Actually, I meant to do this with non-cold water so that my leaven would be faster, but it's too late. I'm gonna boil some water because I'm gonna use that later for my sourdough bread. I prefer using either filtered water or boiled water that is like cooled down to room temperature, just because I don't want any funky things in my tap water affecting my bread. You know, that's a variable I really don't want to mess with. So we have our sourdough starter ready, and now I let this sit for like 5 hours to activate and be ready. And in 2 hours, I will mix my autolyse, which is where I hydrate the flour with water. So I'll see you in a couple hours. All right, so it's been 2 hours. It's currently 2:20. I'm starting this bread process a little late because I woke up early this morning and I went on a walk instead of doing this, and I had to clean the kitchen. So it's gonna be a late night, but that's fine. So this is the bread that I cut up earlier. This one seems like a little bit more even in terms of crumb. We're looking for like a nice open amount of holes. This one is like kind of huge. I don't really know what the deal is. We're going to start the autolyse for the bread. I'm gonna grab my phone. I'm going off of the recipe that I'm using. I'll link the thing that I paid for down below. She's using bread flour. I don't have bread flour. I only have AP flour. So that's what I'm gonna do. And that's what I've been doing for the last little while. And then I add vital wheat gluten for extra gluten. So we're gonna start with some water. It's a little warm still, but that's fine. Do I take out some water and then I add cold water to it? I think I do that. And then I'm gonna add some flour. So she uses a mix of white flour and whole wheat. I stick to the same ratio just because I don't want to mess with it. I don't really know what I'm doing enough to mess with it, so I'm not gonna mess with it. So I save my bread bags a lot of the time, and I'm very glad I do now because it's come in handy. So then we have some other flours going in here. So this is the autolyse, and like I said, this is how the gluten gets hydrated, and it means that you have more like elasticity to work with. First we need some whole wheat flour. You can use like any other flours that you want. You just need to like eventually learn how to balance how much water. Some flours need more water than others. And then I add all-purpose flour, and then I add some vital wheat gluten to that. I'm gonna start with vital wheat gluten first. So I'm gonna do like 10 grams. And like this is what makes your bread chewy, right? So about 10 grams of vital wheat gluten. And then I'm just gonna add enough so that it reaches that number that I need. And like you can just bake bread with just all-purpose flour. It just will be slightly different because of you need the protein in the flour to like make it chewy and bready. So if you have vital wheat gluten, I highly recommend that. Or if you just have bread flour, just use that. We're going to mix this together. So this whole process of mixing together is just to hydrate the dough. There's no salt, there's no like anything else, it's just flours and water. And this doesn't seem like it's gonna make a lot of bread, but it does end up being a lot, because that boule that I had earlier in the video was exactly the same recipe. We're just mixing it up. It's gonna look like a really shaggy dough. All the dough is mostly mixed in. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's not gonna look that beautiful right now. So now I just scrape it off my fingers. If you've never baked bread before, this has been a very humbling journey where I thought I knew what I was doing. Well, granted, no, I never thought I knew what I was doing, but I felt like I had researched enough videos to like have an idea of what I was doing, but you really don't know until you just start doing it. And like, I was getting pretty bomb boules in the beginning. My first 3 were pretty great. And then my next 3, I got a little overconfident and I started playing around with my starter, and that affected my bread. It was still tasty bread, but the loaves were frisbee loaves, as you might have seen on Instagram. So we have a very shaggy, rough looking dough. This is literally going to sit here for 3 hours covered with a plate. My starter is looking pretty active. I don't know if you'll see here, but there's like bubbles happening. I'll try to get a B-roll of it, but I can tell that it's like starting to become active. It's starting to rise slightly above my rubber band situation, which is good. So hopefully in 3 hours, we'll be ready to go. It has been a few hours. It's now 5 o'clock. We've got our starter, we've got our autolyzed dough, and we're gonna add the entire thing into the pot. And you can see like there's like a webbing, sort of web-like texture. Yeah. I highly recommend washing these like immediately too, because dried on flour is no joke. Okay, and then as per Kristen's video, she suggests using wet hands to sort of spread the leaven on top of the autolyse dough. So you're kind of spreading it on top as a layer, and you mix it all in. So I kind of do like this scooping, pinching, and like pulling method. I don't know if that's like right or wrong or whatever. That's just what I do. You're gonna stir this, mix this, knead this until it's incorporated. That takes about like 2 to 3 minutes. It's very fun. It's like adult Play-Doh. I don't really have the right technique down pat, but whatever you do, just get it in there, you know? It's a very sticky dough. I think we're incorporated. I just like to take the bench scraper and just scrape down the sides just to gather everything together so it doesn't like dry out or anything. We rest again for half an hour. So see you in half an hour. All right, so we have our bread ready to be saltified. We're gonna add a bunch of salt. I think it's like 2% salt. Bread soaks up a lot of salt, and that's the only way it'll taste good. So I have my salt all up on there. I'm gonna wet my hands, but first I'm gonna take a little B-roll. Some people have said that you can just add in salt right when you start adding in your starter. I'm sure they're right, but I don't wanna mess with a technique, and yeah. So now you just dimple in the salty, and then you eventually mix it all in. And like, look at that. The dough is like elastic and fun and very satisfying to play with. So it's better if you have fine salt instead of coarse salt, which is what I have, but from my experience so far, I still make some tasty bread, so it's not the end of the world. So this takes another like 3 to 4 minutes to mix in again. Because the dough is pretty high hydration, like it's a pretty wet and sticky dough, it means that ingredients dissolve into it fairly easily. Look how satisfying and fun that is. I'm mixing it until I no longer feel like the salt granules in the dough. So I'm kind of pinching the dough piece, like the pieces of dough together, and I'm kind of rubbing to see if I feel any salt. Because when you first start going, you start to feel the grainy pieces of salt. But then as you go along, the kosher salt, because it's like a pretty light crystal, I believe it dissolves faster. I want to get like a bunch of different flours to kind of play with and sort of see how it affects the flavor of the sourdough. Just plain white dough is like fine, but I don't really find it has like any specific flavor. Whereas like adding whole wheat, adding rye adds like different dimensions to the flavor, you know? Okay, so this looks ready. We're gonna let this rest for another half an hour, and then I'm gonna do a light fold. Now is time for the light fold. You kind of get a gauge for where the dough is at strength-wise. I'm gonna lightly spritz the table with a bit of water so it don't stick. Wet my hands, wet the bench scraper. And I'm just gonna turn the dough out onto the surface. I do like a little mini shape. So I bring this down and I kind of test to see where the dough is at strength-wise. This is pretty sticky, but promising. So then I tuck it sort of under, and this is where I like do a mini shape, and things are looking pretty good. Look at that. It's a boule. That's just the pre-shape before lightly folding. See you in half an hour. That's what this video, that's what sourdough is. Sourdough is like go, stop, and wait. Like 5 minutes, wait. 5 minutes, wait. But it's like probably like maybe 30 minutes total of like actual work. So while we wait for that, I'm gonna film the rest of my other video. Bye. We're gonna wet our hands. We're gonna wet the surface area just so it doesn't, you know, stick. And we're going to laminate the dough. Kristen from Foolproof Baking said that this is for strengthening the dough. You laminate the dough kind of like how you would laminate like croissants, if you guys have ever made homemade croissants. I have not, but I've watched many videos because I want to make homemade croissants, especially with sourdough. You gotta bring this out to a big rectangle, and you're gonna stretch the dough as far as you can before it breaks. We now have a big rectangle of dough, and now we laminate. So we bring 1/3 in, fold it down, tap down any air bubbles. You're supposed to ideally do that before you seal the dough together. That's fine. So then you lift this side over. And then bring this side down, lightly pat, and this side up, lightly pat. I kind of broke that, that's fine. And then you transfer the dough swiftly but gently over here. So then this rests for another half hour. I'm gonna do the coil fold. So to explain the coil folds is I'm stretching the dough without like really kneading it. This is like how you introduce food to the sourdough. I'm just gonna pop any big bubbles here. We're gonna do a series of 3 coil folds over 45-minute intervals. So I'm gonna wait half an hour, coil fold, 45 minutes, coil fold, 45 minutes, coil fold, an hour, and then I shape. So I'll see you when I get to the shaping situation. That'll be around 10, possibly. And yeah, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's time. It's ready. Look at it go. It's nice and poofy. It's like rounded on the edges. It hasn't totally spluted out. I mean, it has, but not like a ton. I could probably do one more fold, but I don't want to overproof it. I think it's ready to go into the thing. So what we're gonna do is, I'm like super panicking a little bit here. I'm going to lightly flour my surface area. Not like a ton. I don't need a lot. It's just so I can build the top of it, and I'm just gonna then lightly flour the bottom of this. So I'm just gonna get some rice flour, and I'm just gonna generously flour this. I don't have like a banneton or like a form to proof my dough in that's like pretty and has those like rustic little wicker circle things. I actually ordered one, so it's coming hopefully soon. Yeah, rice flour is like the secret to getting it to not stick to your situation. Of course, I just blew away all of the flour that I put on there. I am like not that good at this part. This is probably like my weakest part. So we just turn this over and the dough unsticks itself. Good job, dough boy. And my hands are nicely floured here. Not like really floured, but just like a little bit floured. And I'm going to pull it this way, then pull it this way. Then I go in this way. I pop that bubble. Then I go this way. Then I go this way. Then I go this way. And then now I have a nice round dough boy. I sweep away this stuff. Doesn't help with the surface tension. So now I'm building surface tension so that it stays in like a ball shape, and that will mean that it'll spring open better when I finish doing it. So I basically do this sort of motion to sort of tighten the bottom. Oopsie. That's why So now we have a nice round ball. I like to coat the top part of it just in case. Give it a nice little rub. Doesn't that look great? And then we scooch them on over here. And then I just like to do a little quick stitching just to really stick them in there. Now I just finish with going around the edges. Some people say, or the original recipe says to like proof here for like 10 minutes at room temperature. It's pretty like poofy, so I think I'm just gonna leave it as is, and I'm gonna put it straight into the fridge. Then I just put a bag on top. It's like kind of coming apart. Put in the fridge, and then I let it proof for about 12 hours. So I'm gonna bake this tomorrow at 10. I'll see you tomorrow at 10, and we'll see this loaf turn into a bread baby. It is 11 something, so I slept in a little bit. Our dough has been proofing for many hours. 13 hours, I think. She's looking pretty good. I'm just checking to see if she's proofed properly. I think she has. This is actually the first time I've done a double layer of cloth. Normally I just do a single layer and I just kind of drape the other sides, but we'll see how this is. This looks pretty good though. So now what we do is score. So I've preheated my oven to 500 Fahrenheit and it'll bake for 20 minutes in the Dutch oven to create that steam so that it'll poof up. If you don't have a Dutch oven, you can also do it in a cast iron pan. That's what I did. The oven spring won't be as good because you can't control the amount of steam as well. So you can either put a pan of water underneath it to like create the steam, or you can put in ice in like a cast iron pan, which is what I did to create like consistent steam. But I got a Dutch oven, so I don't have to worry about any of that. So highly recommend. There are lots of different ways to bake bread without a cast iron Dutch oven if you don't have that. So anyway, my cast iron has preheated in there so that doesn't crack when I put it in there because it's really hot. So it's very hot. So we're going to score our dough. So first I flip it onto my parchment paper, lift up this. Ooh, because I lined it with rice flour, it didn't stick to my cloth. That's very nice. I just take this and brush off the excess, unless it doesn't want to come off, which is fine, I guess. That's just the way it is. So I'm gonna take a safety blade that I've put on a skewer. It's not the most refined lam, but it is a lam that I have that works. So I'm gonna do one score at a 45-degree angle across the top. So we'll go across the top. We'll go about a ½ inch deep. Normally, if you're better at cutting than I am, you can do that very easily. So I'm just gonna deepen that score. Whoa, and you can see the bubbles in between. Oh my God, it's so exciting. So you can see the bubbles, which means that it has proofed very nicely. So I'm gonna rush and put this into the oven. Okay. We're ready. I'm ready. Everything's ready. We're good. Oh, very hot, very hot. Gonna close that so it stays hot in there. Gonna take off the lid. Gonna put this baby in there. Ta-da, okay. Let me put the lid back on. Ooh, goodbye, Dutch baby. Dutch baby. Goodbye, bread baby. I put it back in the oven. Okay, see you in 20 minutes. Okay, we're on to my favorite part where we take out the lid and we check out the oven spring. Oh, there's an ear. Oh my God, it looks so cool. Ah. Here we go, look at that oven spring. Oh, that looks perfect. You can see the fermentation bubbles like on the side and the ear pop up. Oh my God, it looks so good. Please ignore my super dirty oven. Now I sit here for 20 minutes watching it go golden brown. I'm gonna bake it until it's like a dark brown, just before it gets burnt, basically, because that's how you get like the caramelization of the flavor. My bread is pretty much done in there. I'm gonna put it out onto this rack and then we'll take a look before it cools. Oh my God, I'm so excited. So I did a whoopsie actually, and I forgot to lower the temperature to 450 after I took off the lid. I realized that like 11 minutes into baking. It's fine, it'll just be a little bit more like brown, but it's fine. So I'm gonna turn off the oven, let that steam out. Oh yeah, et voila, the dough. Oh my God, it's so pretty. I thought it would be more like burnt or whatever, but it's actually okay. I actually could cook this a little bit longer, but this is like a good amount. Then we do my favorite part, the knock test, to make sure that it is good. She's hollow, which means it's baked. Okay, so this is the loaf. I think the way that my loaves are, I probably can do a second cut because it like really expands this way, and I feel like it really wants to expand like this way as well. It's looking pretty good. I cannot wait until I have like a banneton. I'm still waiting for mine in the mail. So I think that it would really improve the overall shape of the boule itself, because you can see here the lumps, like certain like dents, I guess, in the dough, because when I put it in a bowl and I put like a cloth in the bowl, the cloth is like folded, and so that creates this like dent here. It's beautiful. My house smells like freshly baked bread. It's excellent. I'm so happy. There's like an ear here, which you can see. It's beautiful. You can see the gluten sort of like pulling apart, and that's like something that you build with all the different coil folds, with the lamination and all that jazz. Oh, it's so pretty, and in a couple hours I will cut it open to show the crumb here. Yeah, because you don't want to do it right away because all the moisture will come out and it'll be like kind of gummy and like not quite right. So you want to let it cool for a couple hours before you slice into it. The bottom is not too browned. I found that in my cast iron, the bottoms were getting burnt like before. So I looked up different ways to mitigate that. And I figured out that if you just put a baking sheet underneath it, that takes the brunt of the heat, and it doesn't burn the bottom as much. So I'll see you in a couple hours. Let's cut into my dough. I always feel so guilty cutting into it too, because it's just like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Bread is made to be eaten. So let's chop away. I'm so bad at cutting bread. How can I be so bad at cutting bread? Ooh, wow, that is some big bubble action. Holy moly, let's pull these apart. That is some big bubbles. I don't know how I'm getting these giant bubbles. I kind of want them to be more even, but like this is a huge crater. Like what is this? These are some gigantic bubbles. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna eat this right now because I'm not very hungry and I just had a big smoothie. Eventually I'll get better at not cutting it on an angle. I don't know, it's just like, it's so satisfying to open it up, and basically you want like bigger bubbles because that means that the dough is like lighter. It's not gonna be as like dense of a bread. So I have some like kind of more dense bubbles here, but then I have all these like big bubbles at the top. It's actually pretty cool. Sourdough. I've been baking like 2 to 3 loaves a week. I eat like a loaf every 2 days, every 2 or 3 days, with Eddie of course, but I've also been giving them away, which has been pretty fun and satisfying. Although I've been giving like the ones that I was giving away, I wasn't quite as good at baking bread, but now I think I've gotten the handle of things and it feels pretty good. It's so cool. You can see like the gluten like structure inside and like it's like stretching or whatever. Like Carter is very strong and very active. That's just so stinking cool. This has been very fun. So yeah, like I said, I'll post a link to the starter recipe post. It's not really a recipe, I don't know. It's basically like all the things that I did wrong and what I did to fix it. So it's like troubleshooting your starter. And I'll link the recipe for the sourdough that I'm using down below. Like I said, I've been following Kristen's method and she has a video on that if you wanna see exactly how she does all the things right. It's been so fun and I love when you guys send me your loaves too. I've asked a few of you to send me, but like if you bake sourdough, like please feel free to send me DMs of like the cross sections of your sourdough, the tops of your sourdough. I love seeing your bake creations and I love getting hyped about bread with you. You don't have to send any context, you can just send me a picture of bread and I'll be hyped about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, give it a like, comment down below. Have you been on the sourdough train? Obviously, a lot of people have been doing this since quarantine, but tons of people have been doing this way before. So if this is something that you've been doing for a while, let me know down below. Let me know what your favorite part about baking bread is if you wanna try this and all that jazz. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and I hope you guys have a delicious day. Bye. I can hear my neighbor yelling in the backyard, but you know, we gotta work. All right, so a sourdough starter is a basically. What? Also, I realized that like I have like flour all over my body and it's gonna be like that in like a couple of videos. So it's fine, it's real life. I'm pretty sure I also went to the grocery store like this too.